Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 5, Episode 40. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. What's on the slate for this week? You've asked for it. You're getting it. Another edition of Two Idiots Discuss Sports. 2025 Major League Baseball Playoff Edition. Although that would sound like we talk a lot about the playoffs, of course we don't. We just bitch about our own teams, one of which had an extremely disappointing, epic collapse at the end of the season. Yes, it was the Atlanta Braves, of course. Thank you to all my loyal listeners. I do appreciate you. If you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review. Send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1. Two Idiots Discuss Sports 2025 MLB Playoff Edition.
Back by popular demand, a somewhat deflated Two Idiots Discuss Sports Major League Baseball playoff season, playoff disappointment for some, elation for others, one Brian Hoff. Brian, say hello to the people.
Hello, people. Good evening, Patrick. It's always a pleasure to hear your voice, see your face come across on the phone. All is good, my friend. Happy October to you. Baseball season's over.
Baseball season is over for both of us. One of us knew that a long time ago and had somewhat accepted as much. One of us was under a delusion in the months of July and August and came to a sad realization in the month of September. Before I go on what can only be qualified as a tirade, once I get going, I know I will continue to go. I want to give you some room. You have an audience to express your opinion about not only the New York Metropolitans and what is a pretty historic collapse, but to talk about the second half of the season for the Atlanta Braves and your feelings about this season in general.
Yeah, so the Braves season started off bad, as we talked about. You know, they started 0-7 on the road, couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. And that continued through a lot of the season. You know, finally got Acuna back, but injuries compounded. The left fielder got suspended for PEDs. Thank you, Mr. Profar. He was out for 80 games. It was a mess. And then, you've got starting pitchers that go down, and everybody in the lineup, it seemed, out of the starting 8, let's leave pitchers out of it, out of the starting 8, most everybody was injured at one point in this year, other than Matt Olson. They used, I don't know the exact number, but the Braves used more players this year, I believe, than any other team in history.
Fun.
Which, if that tells you something.
Yeah.
And don't quote me on that because I don't have it in front of me. It was definitely more than the Braves have ever used, but it might have been in history. Look that up when you have some free time on your time. But it was a mess. The wife and I actually only went to one game this year. We did not go to a Braves game in Atlanta. We did not go to a Braves game in the greater metropolitan D.C. area. We did go to Bristol Motor Speedway and saw the Braves lose to the, who are they? Oh, that's right, the Cincinnati Reds.
Eventual playoff, the final playoff spot.
There you go.
Yeah.
And save your tire. But, from the Braves standpoint, it was just, I stopped watching a while ago. It was kind of depressing. I tried to stay up as much as possible. It was a tough watch. There wasn't a ton of excitement. It was a tough season. And you kind of knew that at the All-Star break. This thing wasn't going anywhere. There was too many pieces that were out. They could not hit baseball. Wooden bat, white ball, no good.
Yeah.
And it just continued until the last 2 weeks of the season where they won 10 in a row. Go figure. So, it was tough. It was just a tough watch. Nowhere near as tough as the Mets watch this year. who had a Major League Baseball best record as of June 12th.
Yep.
21 games above 500. And here's a fun little fact. In the ensuing 108 days, now 108 is significant for those that don't know because there are 108 stitches on a baseball. In the ensuing 108 days, the Mets absolutely fell apart. They went from a 21 games above 500 to a 39-55 record in those 108 days. The Cincinnati Reds, who were the eventual playoff team, didn't win it by any means. You know, they were a 500 team before June 12th. They were a 500 team after June 12th. In fact, I think they were 3 games above 500 in those 108 days. So they didn't necessarily win it. The Mets lost it. And that's a tough one to swallow.
100%. I cannot agree with you more that the Reds, and even if the Diamondbacks had come in and won it, same thing. The Diamondbacks were a team that was hovering around 500 for the entire season. They were hovering around 500 at the end of the season and were only 1 or 2 games out from making the playoffs because the Mets absolutely gave it away.
Absolutely. And that's tough to watch too. You know, I hate to say it but they Metsed it again.
No, they
Metsed. They just found a way.
They Metsed, and they Metsed hard. And now I will begin.
Please do.
First and foremost, the reliance on the pitchers on the staff, which you commented on at the beginning of the season. This is not a staff full of number ones and twos. Not number ones and twos from your own farm system, not guys that you went out and signed. Manaea had one great season in 2024. Kodai Senga had one great season, and I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. And these were the guys who were supposed to be the anchors of the staff, the 1 and the 2. Manaea comes into the season, he's hurt. Senga, he pitches very well in that streak that the Mets were on. Let's say we're going to talk about the first 50 games. We're going to talk about the first few months of the season. Everybody was feeding off of him. You had a lot of guys that the GM Stern likes to go and get. These are guys who, I don't want to say they're off the scrap heap, but they're not career number 1 starters or career number 2 starters. They're guys that you think you can salvage a career, you can invest what are conservative dollars and maybe get a premium return. And then it all fell apart because Senga did what he always does and gets hurt. That's the problem with him. He would be a more reliable starter, and he'd probably be a guy making $58 million a year if he didn't continue to get hurt. And he doesn't stay healthy even when he comes back from being hurt, which is why the Mets were able to get him at such a discount. The staff, after Senga got hurt, started to fall apart. And we talk about it over and over again. When you're starting pitching, can't stay in a game, you put a lot of pressure on your bullpen, a Mets bullpen that wasn't that great to start the beginning of the season. That is one of the problems. So you can blame maybe Stern for taking a gamble on the starting pitching the way that he did, not having a bunch of reliable guys, not having a premium starter. The second thing is you didn't have the bullpen to support not having the greatest starting pitching in the world. Maybe you put that on Stern again. Pitching, bad. What about the offense, Patrick? That fucking offense looked like the 1929 Yankees for a week, and then it looked like the Bad News Bears for a week. It looked like, one of the best offenses that you've ever seen, and then they just couldn't hit a baseball. And they made all sorts of mistakes on the base pass as well, which now I'm going to get into. So hitting, not good. But let's talk about really what this whole collapse was about. The Mets defense wasn't particularly great last year. We talked about that. But it got better over the course of the season. The Mets defense was fucking atrocious. It was so bad that I would routinely turn these games off because an inning where a pitcher who is struggling and needs help, David Peterson, I'm looking at you. His second full year as a starter, a lot of guys think, pundits think he could have been a number 1 or number 2 starter. He gets in trouble. He's having a struggling sophomore season, and the fucking fielding behind him is atrocious. An inning where maybe he would give up 2 or 3 runs, he'd give up 5 or 6 runs, and 1, 2, maybe 3 of them would be unearned. It completely shook his confidence, and it just seemed to trickle throughout the rest of the pitching staff. Their defense was bad. Lindor, who was arguably an MVP candidate last year, not only at the plate, but in the field, he was atrocious. I don't know that he's had such bad fielding numbers in his entire career. Mark Vientos, you and I have talked about it. He made the major league team because of his bat. They had to stick him at third base because they really didn't have another position for him. He did not progress as a third baseman. Pete Alonso, the fucking polar bear. He was terrible in the field during that stretch. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if there was something that was contagious. He made several errors, particularly getting Kodai Senga hurt. A lot of people don't remember this play, but basically he fielded a baseball at first base. Senga's running to the bag. Pete makes a terrible throw. Senga has to basically jump like Superman to try to catch the ball. Does not, by the way. Strains his back in that attempt. He's out. So it wasn't even a pitching motion or some sort of fielding that Senga was doing on his own. He was basically catching what you'd call that can of corn lob from first base to cover the bag. It was thrown so poorly, and he was going to make an effort to get it, that he fucking hurt himself. I'm not going to say anything bad about Brett Baty because he took a lot of heat over the course of the season. He probably had some of the best stats in the field as far as his defense goes in that great stretch, but then he started to fall apart. He's inconsistent at the plate. Juan Soto, who was one of the best offensive, he was the guy who was most consistent at the plate. I just saw this today. He had his worst stats in right field since he's become a major leaguer, and he was like in the bottom 2 or 3 guys in the National League in defensive stats in right field. At the end of this season, when somehow the Mets are still in this thing and have a chance to win it, 29 games left. Who do they have on the schedule? They've got the Reds at home. They've got the Nationals at home. They've got the Marlins at home. They've got some tough games. I think they had to go on the road at the Tigers. We'll talk about the fact that they were collapsing as well. They had to go on the road and face, I believe, the Padres as well and another West Coast team. But what do? In those 29 games to end the season, they had 19 errors. They had 28 unearned runs. The only other team in the major leagues, well, I apologize, I believe it's the National League, but it could be the major leagues that were that bad in the field were the Colorado Rockies. And the Colorado Rockies are so bad that if they could be relegated, they would be relegated. Their defense, as much as anything else, cost them a chance at the playoffs. I think you've got to put that on Mendoza. I read something today, Brian. People in the front office really like Mendoza.
Yep.
There have been a number of reports that there is no animosity in that locker room. There's no animosity in the dugout. Guys get along. Guys are rooting for each other. Guys want to win. But when you see an inning go from 2 earned runs to 6 runs, 4 of them unearned, and it happens again and again and again, it has to be on the manager. You go into a series with the Marlins, you've got to sweep them. And you've got to hope that Milwaukee comes up with at least something because Milwaukee's playing for nothing, right? They don't give a damn. And the Mets still have a chance. They blow the first game with terrible fielding. They have a great game the second game, so They still have an opportunity, and in the final game of the season, with the playoffs on the line, they get shut out by the fucking Marlins. And the inning where they give up the runs, they have an error. And instead of it being 2-0, it's 4-0. The final score being 4-0. The Marlins scored all their runs in one inning, accompanied by an error. And it was just an encapsulation of that entire collapse of the Mets. They make a lot of mistakes in the field. It almost is like it just permeates their psychology such that they don't feel like when they're making those kinds of mistakes in the field that they have any capacity to come back at the plate. Bottom of the ninth, one man on, one out, Francisco Lindor up. You remember Francisco Lindor. He came up against the Atlanta Braves in the top of the ninth with one out and one man on and hit a 2-run home run to put the Mets into the playoffs last year. What does he do this year? He hits into a double play. And that's going to get me to my last point before I get off this fucking soapbox. All of the stats that you see, none of them actually will show how often the Mets had an opportunity to make a routine play in the field or to make some sort of routine play at the plate or on the base pass, and they just didn't do it. And that, again, it gets me back to, is it the manager? Because you're not dealing with a bunch of rookies. You're dealing with guys in their late 20s and early 30s. I mean, some people have said, well, maybe Lindor doesn't have it anymore. Maybe Alonso needs to go. He's too old. I don't know, man. I just don't. How could they play so well for so many games and then look like they don't understand the fundamental rules of baseball for about 100 games and still act like they're invested? I mean, no one is saying there's any animosity between players, between management, between manager, in the locker room, out on the street, in the dugout. Like, they all seem to be pulling in the same direction. They just suddenly fucking suck. That there has to be a head for that. Someone's head has to be chopped off. And, Showalter, what did he do? He got us to a playoff series, end up losing to the San Diego Padres. The team falls apart, in my opinion, through no fault of his own because of the stupid moves that were made for the pitchers that we had at that time. And they fired him. He had 2 seasons, and now you've got Mendoza stewarding a pretty epic collapse, and for some reason, he seems to have the support of the president, the general manager, the owner of the team. I'll say this. If the Mets look anything like this team next year at any point, you've got to fire Mendoza. To the extent that you have any assets on that team over the age of 30, I'm looking at you, Francisco Lindor. I don't know if Alonso's going to come back. We can talk about this. He declared for free agency, as most Scott Boras clients will do as soon as they're eligible. I don't see someone paying Pete Alonso $54 million a year to be a designated hitter because he looks so bad in the fucking field this year. You're not going to put him at first base. You've got other players on the team, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil. Do you gamble on these guys reverting to form in 2024? Or do you say this is what they are in 2025 and potentially some of 2026 and maybe we need to go in another direction? I don't know, but I've never been so frustrated by a team that as soon as that inning happened, and it seemed to happen every other game, where it's 2 runs and then all of a sudden it's 6 runs because of an error, because of something stupid, like just throwing to the wrong bag after you've caught the ball in the outfield, just not throwing it to the right cutoff man. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I had no faith whatsoever that even if this team made the playoffs and were in place of the Reds, I believe the Reds are going to San Diego, or are they going to LA? No, they're going to LA.
They're going to LA.
The Mets aren't going to LA and winning 2 out of 3 baseball games. They're just not. They just make too many mistakes, and I think LA is way too loaded So it is frustrating to see a team play so well and to look at essentially the same exact team 3 months later and watch them bumble around like 4 and 5-year-olds on a t-ball field. Rant concluded.
Yeah, that was epic. That was well done, sir. I feel your pain, and they go from the 1921 Yankees to actually yanking their wanker. It's just bad, and I agree with you. Like, I read the same thing that Mendoza's got support. Mendoza's going to be back, but there's no guarantees on anybody else. Well, I can appreciate the fact that nobody's it's a friendly locker room and everything's all well and good. But at some point in time, and I'm gonna compare this to the Braves, at some point in time, are you just too nice?
Right. That's a good point.
Is it, when the Braves made their run in 21, they picked up they picked up Peterson, right? Who was a fireball in the locker room. Not that he was an asshole, but he was a fireball. Do you have any emotion in the Mets locker room? And that's one of the things that I think is missing, because the Braves were the same thing, right? You've got professional baseball players, and the Mets are old. You got a roster of 30-year-olds, right? Now, technically, by definition, I guess, they should be in the prime of their career, right? 28 to 32 should be the prime of their career.
Right.
So they should still have some room to run. But that window is closing. And at some point in time, and listen, I'm not a professional athlete. I don't play on television. I didn't sleep at a Motel 6 last night. However, at some point in time, you're a professional athlete. I understand baseball. Listen, baseball has slumps. But you can't slump that poorly. You can't go from the 1929 Yankees to the Keystone Cops in a matter of 24 hours. That's where the problem comes in. The Braves just didn't hit the ball for months. Like, they went through a team-wide, multi-month-long slump where they couldn't do anything. And they were, they just couldn't do a damn thing. They couldn't hit the ball. They couldn't get a runner over. They couldn't do anything. They're piecing together a roster. And, again, for the Mets, we talked about at the beginning of the season, who are your 1 and 2 starters? You don't really have them. And that played its way through. And then, again, when you don't have those starters and now you're going 2 and 3 innings instead of 5 or 6 or 7, now you're taxing a bullpen. That's not that awesome either. And everything kind of seems to snowball at that point. Now, you've got 8 guys out in the field that have nothing to do with pitching staff. They're just professional baseball players whose job is to do 3 things: throw the ball, catch the ball, and hit the ball. That's what you got to do.
Right.
That's what you're paid for. You got to run some bases too, and you screwed that up a few times. But that's going to happen. But the reality is something, I agree with you, like a head's got to roll somewhere. And is it just an assistant? Right? Is that what's going to happen? Now, the Braves lost a couple of key assistants a few years ago. Everything went to absolute shit when Ron Washington and Eric Young ended up going to Los Angeles. But is it the assistant coaches that are to blame? Is it everybody's hunky-dory and kumbaya in the locker room, but is there enough? Is there an absolute leader? And I think that's what the Braves miss, is they miss not just the fire, but they miss a leader. They let Freddie go. They let Dansby go. They let Max Fried go, right? Freddie, I think, was an accounting error at some point in time between 2 people, or miscommunication between an agent and someone. Dansby, shortstops were going for too much money, and you couldn't pay Max Fried the extra year, which I think you could have, because he started when he was older anyway, and he didn't have as many innings on his arm. But you lost leaders in the clubhouse, and nobody stepped up. And as much as bringing in a Juan Soto helps, there's a big fucking ego that comes in along with that. And I'm sure everybody's kumbaya, but is he an actual leader? Or is he just a high-priced assassin?
Well, let me speak to that. This is a great point that you're making. And I don't know as much as pundits that I saw say this as commenters, and it's a testament to the fact that there are so many guys in New York who are really keyed in or privy to information inside of a dugout or a locker room. JD Martinez and Julio Iglesias. Editor's note: the podcast host will refer to Jose Iglesias a number of times as Julio Iglesias. He's an idiot. Editor's note concluded. These were not guys who were at the apex of their career. They were on the back end of their career and had a lot of experience, played very well for the Mets, were instrumental in the Mets making not only the playoffs last year, but they got key hits in the lead up to that, and Iglesias in particular had some key hits in the playoffs. What these commenters were saying are things that they had heard. Juan Soto doesn't really carry as much of an ego in the locker room as a lot of people would think that he would. The issue, if it is an issue, and I think this is what you're speaking to, is he's not a rah-rah guy. He's not a guy that goes and does all the camaraderie things in the locker room. He's not a firebrand. He is I follow my routine. I'm very deliberate in the way that I approach each one of my days while I'm playing baseball. I don't want to call him a creature of superstition, but maybe more a creature of habit. And he's to himself because that's where he has to go, I guess, in his own mind, to be successful. So you do need guys who have that same level of experience, same level of stature to be able to go to players when things aren't going well, or to be able to unite a locker room by speaking out. And Soto really wasn't that guy. And as it turns out, Alonso's not as much that guy either. So who are you putting that pressure on? Is it Lindor? Well, Lindor may one or two or three times say something. The problem that I think that Lindor had was he was playing like shit during the streak. So if you're going through a bad streak and the guy who's speaking up is part of the problem, that's problematic. So you lose someone who has a lot of experience, not only on a baseball diamond, but in a dugout and in a locker room, in JD Martinez and Julio Iglesias. You also lose a fire guy, like you said, a firebrand. Jesse Winker did not play a game after, I believe, June 4th. And he was instrumental. He was that Milwaukee series last year in the playoffs was a great illustration. After Pete Alonso hit his home run to put the Mets up, a lot of people don't remember, Winker goes out and gets a double. And then it's, what's his name, gets a single. Editor's note, Starling Marte. Winker's able to score on a single, slams his helmet down, so now you've got an insurance run above what Pete Alonso just did in that 3-run homer. It's 4-2. Winker was that kind of guy, and he didn't play. So, you saying that, I think there was a problem. Everybody got along and liked one another, but no one was stepping up and saying, this is what we need to do, or stepping up and saying, guys, just fucking relax. I mean, we're a team that was 20 games above 500. We've gone on several multi-game winning streaks. Everyone relax. It's fine. I don't think there was anybody in the locker room to say that. And the tension just started to set in. It was like a fog or a haze that just wouldn't lift. And no one knew what to do about it. And Mendoza, I think you might be right. I think he may be the kind of manager that goes and pats one on the back and it doesn't know how to, when it's needed, when certain guys in particular needed, kick a guy in the ass.
It's interesting, first off, to hear that about Soto. But I get it. And you use the word deliberate. You just think about him in the batter's box. He is deliberate with everything that he does. To his little showman, little strut, swagger, whatever the hell he's doing. I don't like it. I'm sure you love it. It is what it is. But there are 3 words that I remember hearing in 2021, the beginning of the Braves season. They were really starting off slow, and 3 words came out at one point in time. Players only meeting. There was a players only meeting before or after a series in the desert, in your backyard, as a matter of fact. and things turned around. I don't know that, and granted, you never know if these things happen to eventually it leaks out that there's a players only meeting, right? There's a come to Jesus in the locker room, like just as you're saying, it's like calm that down, guys. Like the pressure's here, we get it. We're professionals, we can do this. Like get your head out of your ass. That hasn't happened for the Braves in the past few years. I'll bet you dollars and donuts. I don't know, but that didn't happen in New York. Didn't happen in Queens. And I think that absolutely comes down to a player leadership in the locker room. And you have to have it. When Freddie left or when Dansby left, there was word that Ozzie Albies was going to, now going to be his team. He was going to be the voice. I don't know that he's got that personality. Right? He's a fun guy. Everybody loves him. But I don't know that he has that fiery personality. Acuna does on the base paths. Like when Acuna's going, he does. But I don't know that he has that in the locker room. And you may rerun it up against the same thing in New York. And it comes with experience. It comes with, even if Lindor is part of the problem, having a bad season or bad run, somebody's still got to be able to step up. This is a team sport. You have to get out of your own way at times, step up, and rally the troops. It has to happen, right? Golf. You had Ryder Cup this weekend. Golf. Team, individual game, team sport over the weekend. U.S. was getting hammered the first 2 days, and they came out and made it quite a run at the end of it. You know why? Because they were all pulling the same rope, and somebody had conversations with before either that night, Saturday or Sunday morning when they went out. Somebody had to have those conversations, right? You've got to get your mindset right. And if you don't have that mindset right, it's never going to happen. If you start spiraling and nobody's there to get you out of the spiral, it ain't ever going to change. So you got to have somebody in that locker room that can step up. The question is, who's it going to be?
I'm going to comment on this because if you recall, you may remember the podcast episode last year where, and I can't remember the pitcher's name, it's going to escape me. The Mets were terrible. The Mets were, I think they started out 5-15. It may not even have been that good. They had the relief pitcher that when he got pulled, he took his glove, he threw it over the net on the home side and threw it into the crowd. Fan caught it. They cut him that night. The players had a players-only meeting, and that's when the Mets went on that streak last year. By way of recollection, now I could probably go and look this up. I'm not going to do it right now. I don't remember whether or not the Mets had a players-only meeting after they started into these losing streaks. Editor's note, they did. The Mets did have a players-only meeting in the year of our Lord 2025, and they still played like shit. Because the funny thing about this season was they went on a losing streak after they were 21 games above 500, and then they went on another winning streak. And then they went on a losing streak, and then they went on another winning streak. And then they finished the year by playing atrociously. So perhaps the reason why they didn't have a players-only meeting is because every time they got to that point, they were able to turn it around. And I think maybe guys on that team thought every time they turned it around, now we are quote-unquote turning it around. We're not going to take our foot off the pedal. But the problem was, unlike last year, where the defense, not great, but timely double plays, timely plays in the field, they were just fucking terrible this year. And, there has to be someone to step up, like you said, if guys are continuing to play that bad in the field. The problem in my mind was it was so prevalent. It wasn't unique to one or two guys. It was so prevalent that it was hard for anyone to turn around and say, you need to step it up, because they were playing like shit in the field too. I want to move on. I could go on about this for probably another 30 to 40 minutes, but there are two other teams that I want to throw out there. I just want to get your comments quickly because the Mets weren't the only team to collapse. In the middle of the Mets playing like shit, they went 2 to Detroit, and I was like, oh my God, we're going to be completely out of it. The Mets take 2 or 3 from the Tigers. The Tigers, who were on fire last year and played really well at the beginning of the season, end up losing to the Cleveland Indians. And I Don't know that I sent this to you, although I may have. It's the meme where they intersplice scenes from this season and the record from this season with the movie Major League. And it talks about how if you've seen the movie Major League, you'll understand completely what I'm saying. If you haven't seen that movie, you're not as cool as you think you are. You need to go out and immediately watch this movie. But Major League, where Cleveland's terrible in the beginning of the season and they have all of the tropes to show how bad they are, and you're seeing scenes from this season, and then all of a sudden they turn it around and they overtake the Tigers. It's great. What are your thoughts on that? Because I never saw Cleveland coming out of nowhere. And then the Astros, first time in 9 years they haven't made the playoffs, but if you look at their team, it's a playoff team. I'm not sure what happened there, but they fell apart in the end too and end up missing the playoffs altogether. I think they let Seattle take them. Any thoughts on either one of these two?
Yeah, Detroit is, if you look back at, I don't know, 2 months ago, two best teams in baseball are the Milwaukee Brewers and the Detroit Tigers. Detroit Tigers have arguably the best pitcher in the major leagues.
Yep.
And they're a tough game inside and out. And funny enough, Charlie Morton pitched for the Tigers at some point in time. We'll talk about Charlie in a minute. But yeah, there was a collapse that was unworldly and reminiscent of a Mets collapse from years ago in September when it was 10 games in 30 days?
Right.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
But I think weren't the Guardians 15 games back at one point in time this year?
15 and a half games. 15 and a half.
How do you come back from 15 and a half games back? That's the question, right? It's not necessarily, I don't know if it's a collapse, but, and maybe it is. I don't know the records. I didn't compare the two. What happened in that stretch, but a 15 and a half game comeback is unbelievable. It's interesting because I wasn't aware because baseball was almost dead to me, not quite, but almost dead to me. I wasn't aware that the Tigers were in such a slump that they were in until I get a text from my wife's niece, who was a Cleveland fan or a Guardians fan, who's saying, "Hey, this is the one time that I'm going to root for the Braves." Because when the Braves won, Cleveland's only a game and a half back. I'm like, how is this even possible? Now, fortunately, they still made the playoffs, but that kind of collapse is lingering. And not only that, but now you've got a team that's relatively hot going into October.
Yes.
And we both know, and many of you out there in podcast land know this, it's not necessarily the best team that wins the World Series. It's the hottest team that wins the World Series. How many wild card teams have we seen over the past 10 years win the World Series? Without knowing that number, and I intended to look this up, and I didn't, because as we discussed earlier, our days both went crazy and sideways. However, you got a team that's 15 and a half back, comes back and wins the division. Fortunately, Detroit still makes the playoffs. Otherwise, they're in Mets land, right? No offense, but they're in Mets land.
Oh, agreed.
The Astros seem to be one of these teams. They were up and down all year. If I'm not mistaken, they were riding the wave similar to what the Braves were doing for a minute, and they got out of it and started riding high again, and then just fiddled at the end. You've got Altuve and Carlos Correa back. Altuve obviously not back. It's still been, but Carlos Correa is back. So you've got the middle of the infield. But let's be honest, they're old. They've got a decent team, and I think a playoff team, regardless of them being old. But it's baseball, man. 15 and a half games is not just baseball. 15 and a half games is working your ass off and grinding it out and having a leader to step up and get stuff taken care of. Seattle, man, you got the big thumper back there. You got Cal Raleigh Jr. hitting 60 home runs. That's a team that won the division more than the Astros lost it. I thought it was incredible to see somebody on that run who wasn't named Aaron Judge.
Right.
Let alone a catcher, because 162 games kneeling down the entire time is kind of hard on the body. So I don't even know how many games he actually played this year. He did not play 162. I don't know how many he actually played. I'm trying to find it. But, that in itself is a good story. And maybe one to more look towards as we get into the playoffs is what Seattle going to do. Now Seattle was also the team that set the record for number of wins in the season at 116, maybe 114 at one point in time.
Lost to the Yankees.
And what's that?
They lost to the Yankees.
And they lost to the Yankees. Didn't make it to the World Series. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I am befuddled about the Cleveland Detroit situation. 15 and a half back, good for them. That's a mountain to climb. I remember at one point in time, Chipper Jones saying before the All-Star break, he said, listen, man, if you're 10 back at the All-Star break, you got a problem. They came back 15 and a half.
Yep.
That's tremendous work. Now, they need some help with that, but that's tremendous work. It's a tremendous work to keep your head in the game, to keep pushing forward. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
Well, let's talk about it. We can start in the American League with regard to the playoffs, because the reward for catching the Detroit Tigers, who have been slumping and limp into the playoffs, is you get to play them.
Yes.
So the Guardians are playing the Tigers. I'll just come right out and say it. If the Tigers can turn it around and beat them, that would be the ultimate slapback. It's like the Texas Rangers, 2 years ago? And the fact that they went up, where did they go? End up getting swept, and they had to play them. I think it was against the Orioles, maybe. And then ended up just going on a tear. But that was a little bit different because the Rangers were still a good team. They were disappointed in themselves for having gotten swept. The Tigers basically lost 2 of 3 or got swept over the course of the last couple of months. I have to go with Cleveland.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it could be the ultimate slapback, and it may be something that Detroit's wanting to do, and I'm sure they're talking about. It's all bulletin board material. But again, it's a matter of who's hot coming into the playoffs. And if you've got a team that's playing at home that just came back 15 and a half to take you down and take the division, that's going to be a tough road to hoe. And I will also take the Cleveland Guardians.
The Yankees and the Red Sox. Just from a history.
That's the ALCS, right? Oh, no. That's the first round of the playoffs. I'm sorry.
I mean,
about that.
It's crazy, though, that you're getting that matchup. First of all, that 3 teams from the AL East end up making the playoffs, which we thought might happen in the NL East. Here you have the Yankees now matched up with the Red Sox. The Yankees, which I think it was up to the last or the second to last game, had an opportunity to win the division, and they're playing as well as anyone. They were right there with the Blue Jays. Now they're taking on the Red Sox, 2 teams that know each other really well. Frankly, I see that as a toss-up. I don't know, I don't know what their season record was. Again, we both ran into some things today and probably would have had more stats. I'm wondering what their season series record was, because I believe these 2 teams were pretty evenly matched throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, the Yankees have pitching issues, right? Other than Max Fried, who's been pitching lights out the entire season. But they don't have their Haas. And I'm trying to find the Red Sox head-to-head with the Yankees right now. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be tough. It's going to be a good series. It could be one of the better ones. The Red Sox actually 9-4 record against the Yankees this year.
And there you go.
As much of a toss-up as it is, the Red Sox were also another one of these teams to squeak in at the end, right? They hit a walk-off. What was it? A walk-off home run, walk-off something on Saturday to clinch, or was it Friday? Something along those lines. they were wearing their Green Monster unis, which were pretty solid. So I'm going to say it was a Friday night if it was the City Connect shirts. But they come in relatively hot. I think it's going to be a good series. They're playing in New York, as a matter of fact. So they're in the Bronx. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, here's another thing. I mean, you got 3 games in one city, right? There is no home and home.
Correct.
Wild card. So you got 3 games in Cleveland and you got 3 games in New York. And even though there's a 9-4 record, you still got to go into New York and win. That may be a little less of a toss-up, or maybe that makes it more of a toss-up that Boston owns the season record. I will take the Yankees and Judge in that one.
I don't think that there's anything. I mean, they're playing at home. It is postseason. Granted, the Red Sox have played really well against them throughout the course of the season. And by way of a 9-4 record, they had to win a number of games in the Bronx. I still think it's a toss-up, and specifically because the teams know each other so well. And like you said, the Yankees, as strong as they are, let's see what kind of pitching they get. I'm not worried about their pitchings in the first game, and maybe even the second game. But what about the third game? And if the Red Sox can steal one, that'll be very interesting. Game 3. What about the Cubs and the Padres? I think that's going to be an excellent series. The Padres still a very strong team. The Chicago Cubs, you and I talked about it at the beginning of the season. We thought the division was going to come down between the Brewers and the Cubs. Turns out, I mean, God, I don't think either one of us saw the Brewers being as good as they were, or at least winning as many games as they did. But the Cubs really weren't a surprise. Do you think the Cubs can go to San Diego and win?
So let me start off by saying I don't like San Diego. I don't like them. They just rub me the wrong way. I would not blame it on third baseman
Machado?
Thank you, Manny Machado. I would not blame my hard feelings on Manny Machado. And I remember going back and forth with a buddy of mine when he signed with San Diego and signed the monster deal. He said, "Good riddance, let him rot in San Diego," and I agreed with him. They've got great fans. I was out in San Diego actually during for a conference during a San Diego Dodgers series, and at this bar at this massive hotel, it was actually a Gaylord. There were people that were not staying at said hotel in this establishment, and it was quite an environment to be in. I still don't like them. I think Chicago can do it. I think Craig Counsell at the helm can get that done. I don't think it's going to be easy. No, wait a minute. San Diego's got to go to Chicago.
Am I looking at this wrong?
Yep. San Diego's got to go to Chicago.
That makes it. Hold on. That's a whole different story.
Yeah. I think Chicago. I think the Cubs take that one.
All right. I agree. I was about to make a case for San Diego, but if it's in Chicago and I looked at this the wrong way, I've got to go with Chicago. They haven't made the playoffs in a few years. Chicago fan will be there. I think the weather could be a factor because San Diego is one of the most beautiful cities in the world and one of the most temperate. So we'll see if San Diego can tolerate that. Here's the easiest one, and it's a throwaway. Do the Reds have a chance against the Dodgers?
I'm going to say no, unless the Dodgers just can't get out of their own way. I think a 3-game set in LA against that lineup is tough to beat. You know, you got to give it to Tito Martinez for getting the Reds there. You know, he's made the playoffs with how many teams now?
No kidding.
So, unbelievable manager, without a question, Hall of Famer. But I just don't know that you can go in with a 500 record and beat the Dodgers in LA in 3 games. I think Shohei's going to get a start, right? He's got to get a start.
Right.
And he's going to hit bombs. That's what he does. He throws ball hard. He hits ball long way.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't, I think that any team, based on the way the playoff race played out in the National League, whether it was the Diamondbacks, and maybe the Diamondbacks just because of the familiarity, but they struggled. I've been to a couple of those Diamondback games where the Dodgers came back and beat them. Between the Reds and the Mets, the Reds being a 500 team, the Mets playing like shit. Whoever got the Dodgers, it was just going to be very likely 2-game sweep. I'm going to offer this to you, young man. We could go into the potential playoff matchups, or you could come back and we could do a specific episode when we have more details. We could do another Two Idiots Discuss Sports, the championship series. Are you interested?
I'm interested. I think that would be fantastic. I think that will be now division series or there's got to be championship series. Yeah, I'm in. I think you have to look at you got to look at the Brewers. They play consistent baseball to get there, and the Phillies are dangerous.
Exactly.
Top to bottom, Phillies are dangerous. What teams are hot in the National League? I don't know. But Milwaukee's been playing strong all year, and Philly's been playing strong all year, so maybe them. I would not have thought Toronto would have been the number one seed in the American League if you would have given me $100,000. I think Seattle's got a shot. I think Cleveland's got a shot. So those are my two picks. I think I'm going to take Milwaukee, Philadelphia. I'm going to take Seattle, Cleveland, and I'll see you in the championship series.
Sounds good, sir. Thank you.
All right, buddy.
Act 2, Epilogue.
After that epic losing streak to allow Cleveland to win the division, the Tigers come back and win 2 of 3. Once again, I was wrong. But that's what makes baseball in October so much fun. And I will soon be discussing this and more with Brian again in another episode of Two Idiots Discuss Sports 2025 Major League Baseball Playoff Edition. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.